Hey guys, welcome back. Tisha here, back with another chapter read of Give Me Back My Children by Sarah Allred. We are in chapter 16. Hit that like button as we begin R23, December 14th, 2005. We drove through the night in a snowstorm. I hope to visit and make up for lost years since I was finally worthy to be a part of Rich's other life. She didn't say lost weeks or months. She said lost years with an S. There's training you have to go through before you can enter the land. It'll take all the time we have. Uncle Warren will call in 17 hours to confirm your covenants before you enter the mission of Zion. So much for catching up with my husband. My mind couldn't focus on Warren Jeff's training. I get to see my girls. I was finally with Richard to live happily ever after. I sacrificed everything asked of me. For years, I suspected Rich hid more than he let on. He might have more wives I didn't know about. It'd been over 2 years since he began his secret life. I was the new wife now, feeling like I was sitting by someone I barely knew. After hours of listening, Rich turned off the disc and began a conversation. Understand how much I'm counting on you. Part of the reason I pray so fervently for you to come is because of how much I lean upon you. So not because of how much I love you and I miss you, but because of how much I need you there for me to lean on. You've been trying to come here, but it hasn't been all your fault. I've struggled with my other wives and need your help to unite the family. This past year, I've tried to get close to my other family members, but we seem to get farther from unity. Lizzie has had a hard time. I couldn't allow her to get pregnant until I felt her. What? He's doing the same thing that if you watch Sister Wives, that Cody Brown did, saying I couldn't allow her to get pregnant, meaning he was withholding from her. I couldn't allow her to get pregnant until I felt her making an effort to be a part of me. She's expecting now, and I feel like we're starting to get close, but far from where I need it to be. Being in Zion, the tests are much greater. I doubted trials in Zion would be worse than the hell I experienced without my girls. On top of that, I doubted my sister wives had it harder than I had the past couple of years, if she only knew. Because they couldn't even eat certain things. But I guess she's going to find out, right? If we don't change some things, I'm going to lose some, if not all of my family, Rich continued. Warren checked in on us often, and each time I haven't been able to say my family is united. So lie. The man don't know what you're saying. Lie. I fear for my family, but have perfect confidence in you to stay close to me. Each of my ladies will tell you about their struggles to get you to pick sides, but I need to know you will stay close to me and report what they say. So he wants her to tell on the sister wives, which is one of the reasons why they have division in the first place, because you never say or do anything that encourages them to unite as one. A lot of you have said it in the comment section. They pin the wives against each other and encourage the separation, even though they try to make it seem like that's not what they're doing. My imagination often traveled to how this day would go, the day I finally went to Zion. For many months, I battled with the truth that I wasn't good enough. While I sacrificed my all, the rest of my husband's family were farther advanced than I. A stab of frustration hit me, but I smothered the feeling and forced myself back to the moment. Why would I waste my time going down the dark path? I was excited to see my girls. What would it be like to see them? They must be waiting for me. And as soon as I stepped out of the vehicle, they'd run to me. I'd scoop them in my arms and feel their kisses all over my face as I smothered them with love I couldn't show for almost 2 years. We drove through the night. I was busy with the boys and catching up with the stranger behind the wheel. I trusted he was leading me to my new life since I had no idea where we were going. We traveled through the storm. Rich stopped and slept for a while. I couldn't sleep. I was on too much of a high. I gazed at the three most important males in my life and felt a swelling inside of me. The path to this point was long and heartbreaking, but happier days were ahead. The only thing I ever wanted was to dwell in peace with my husband and children. After 22 hours of travel, the sun peaked his light over the hills. We stopped at a gate, and a man I didn't recognize on a four-wheeler opened it. We drove through, and I saw a tower above the trees. Rich said it was the watchtower, and the man was always watching to warn of any breach of newcomers on the property. We drove a bit through the trees and rough roads until we reached a small clearing with a log house nestled inside. Smoke came out of the chimney. It looked like a two-family home, as there were two front porches and front doors, perfectly mirror imaged. Rich drove around the back and was greeted by a man, Colton Hill. I saw him in church years before. His family came out of the opposite side of the duplex, but I didn't see the familiar faces of my family. Disappointment jabbed my heart as my dream reunion of greeting my family disappeared. I was hugged and welcomed by Colton Hill's family. Strangers. I followed Rich through the door. We walked into a small laundry and mud room. The washing machine and dryer noisily worked together. Rich flipped the light switch. I felt like a stranger entering someone else's territory. Disappointment and fear attacked my stomach. Tears threatened to spill over. This was supposed to be my home. Rich's home. Isn't home supposed to feel warm and inviting? These feelings were absent as I followed Rich. He took my hand and drew me close to him. Welcome home, sweetheart. He studied my face and his brow furrowed. What's the matter? I'm nervous. I'm a stranger in your world. Hot tears spilled over. Where are my girls? Do they think I'm a stranger too? Is that why they weren't throwing themselves into my arms? The thought pained me. Did they remember me as their mother? Did they feel betrayed? Were they told I wasn't with them because I was less of a person than the rest of the family? Sweetheart, when we get your stuff out of my truck, I've got to get back to the road to go to Texas. I'm supposed to be there in 24 hours, and it takes that long to get there. You're home now. He wrapped his arms tightly around me and placed his lips on mine. This is an answer to my prayers and yours, Sarah. My family together in Zion. Our little haven. I wouldn't be here without you. I need you, Sarah. So as soon as she gets home, he's leaving. There were 3 bedrooms off the laundry area and a set of stairs going up. Rich opened one of the bedroom doors. This is my room. He turned straight across from his bedroom and opened a door. And this is your room. The room was medium-sized with a bare mattress. It had boxes of my things already. They were accidentally taken with Mara's stuff when we lived in our pink house many lifetimes ago. The room was cold. Why are you putting me here? The last place I wanted to be was right across from you, and you know it. I want you close. I've missed you and the boys. My heart leapt in excitement. It was the first time Rich said those words to me since he married Mara, and I felt excited about what it might mean. Are you leaving for Texas to get a new wife? He smiled and kissed my forehead, touching the tip of my nose with his finger lovingly, and said nothing. A noise outside the door caught my attention. I slipped around the corner to the staircase where a little girl sat with a look of wonder and almost fear on her face. Her hair, as always, was sticking straight up as if she touched a spark plug. Her huge sky blue eyes were wide. Did little Sarai change so much since our last heart-wrenching goodbye over 16 months ago? My heart leapt out of my chest as I moved towards her. The closer I got, the look of wonder left, and fear became more pronounced. I took her in my arms, and her body stiffened. My little girl was looking at a stranger. My nightmare was realized as I saw my oldest daughter in her nightgown and messy hair. She had ketchup on her little cheek. I reached for her, and she stiffened. Janetta, give Mother Sarah a hug, Rich said. I betrayed my 2 young daughters by not being good enough, and I had to earn it back. So they didn't even remind them of who their mom was by showing pictures and things of that nature. And now she is a complete stranger to them because they've been out of her life at such a precious age for 16 months. God give my weak soul strength to get through this. I prayed silently as I took them in my arms. Rich wrapped his long arms around all of us. We are thankful we are all together. Now, together forever. Soon everyone came to greet us. Rich stepped in his room, followed by Mara, and the door closed. Two men unloaded Rich's truck and put my stuff inside the entry neatly out of the way. Welcome home, Sarah. I turned to a dear friend, Kevin. He'd been close to Rich since before we were married, and a close friend to me after we were married. He gave me the first welcoming hug outside of Rich. I'm sure I don't have to tell you how long we've waited for this. He reached for Isaac, who had been scooped up by Janetta. Kevin tousled Andrew's hair. Good to see you, little Andy. We need some good men like you around. I was glad to see Kevin beside him. I didn't know anyone on the land I later learned was called R23. Chapter 17. One more makes five. The day after Rich dropped me off at my new life and disappeared to R17, Texas, land of refuge, I tried to settle in. Everything in me resisted being in the room straight across from not only my husband, but the husband of every grown woman under the same roof. I'd always know what he did and who'd he do it with. Whenever I wanted to complain, I forced myself to stop. I needed to keep myself in check, so I didn't compromise the blessing of being with my family. Painful recent experiences taught me anything was better than nothing. I chose to be happy. It was midday on the second day. I went upstairs to get a drink in the kitchen. As I walked through the dining room, I caught part of a conversation between Lizzie, Mara, and Julie. Why do you think your father wanted him to go to 17? Lizzie asked. The question was aimed at Mara. I don't know. I'm guessing it's some kind of meeting or project. Rich didn't say how long he'd be gone, just that he had to be there. We all know Rich is getting a new wife. I'm sure you must feel something, I said, daring to address the elephant in the room. There was silence before Mara nodded. I agree. I bet father is doing weddings at R17. Rich and Ben went because they're both getting married. I've had the same gut feeling each time Rich got married. He told me he'd be gone 2 days, so I'm sure he'll be back tomorrow. Again, there was silence. Well, I don't care what he's doing. I'm not doing anything to make it easier for any little princess disturbing my life. I've had my fair share, Lizzie said. She stormed out of the room. The more we thought about it, the more we were convinced Rich would come home with another wife. I gathered up my baby and listened to the tapes. It had to be done before I was allowed to take part in anything happening on Zion, including parenting my own children. Mara and Julie got in the old white Suburban, otherwise known as the family vehicle, and took a trip to the storehouse. They gathered furnishings and bedding to dress up the spare room adjacent to mine. When I peeked at their progress, I felt a small stab of jealousy. Why didn't they do this to help me feel welcome when I got here? I'm glad you're doing this. It'll help her feel welcome into our family, I said. Despite the jealousy, I was proud of my fellow sisters for such a kind thought. It was hard, especially for the most recent wife, to welcome another. There was a fear of losing your place, even your own identity. Later, Mara came and plopped herself across my bed, and Julie sat down on the floor near. We talked about individual experiences and first impressions of Zion. Why didn't you get my room all cute and welcoming? I finally asked. I didn't know how you liked it and figured you would want to do it yourself, Julie said. The answer caused me to search inward. Am I too hard to please? Do I intimidate people when I try to be inviting and welcoming? I enjoyed the company of the women I came to know as sisters and friends. We chatted for a while before they retired to their rooms. There was a strict rule of being in your own rooms and beds by 10. So you ruling everything else and you're telling me, a grown adult, what time I have to go to bed too? We already broke the rule last night. There were no exceptions for women and children. Children were put to bed at 8 so they could get rest needed to be up, dressed, and ready for class at 6 a.m. I listened to another training before I fell asleep close to 10:30. The mellow voice in the recordings put me to sleep. Lips pressing gently against mine woke me up. My heart leaped with excitement. I dreamed of the time when I was again endearingly awakened. It was after midnight. I sat up and threw my arms around the man I loved and missed. I touched a lamp on my bed stand and looked into his tired, smiling face. Oh, how I've missed you, Papuska. He bent down and kissed me again. I'm going to love holding you in my arms all night long. Come with me. I have something to show you. Taking me by the hand, he put his finger to his lips. He didn't want anyone else to wake up. Was I mistaken about him getting another wife? We left my room and went across the hall to his room. Sitting on the corner of his bed was a familiar young girl, Natalie. Someone I knew, wasn't much older than 15. Her father was an old family friend. I tended her sister before she was a twinkle in her daddy's eye. I blinked, holding back the millions of thoughts and questions running through my mind, and politely smiled. Natalie got to her feet and threw her arms around me. Did she feel safe now after a life-altering experience? I'm grateful to see you. I feel like I'm home, she said. I stepped back, took her hand, and covered it with my own. We'll do all we can to help you feel welcome. You must be exhausted, ready for a shower and comfortable bed. When I turned around, Rich was gone. He must have gone upstairs. The bathroom is there and should have everything you need. I'm just across the hall if you need anything. I gave her one last hug and left the room, not wanting to be there when Rich returned. When I closed the door, I leaned against it to catch my breath. How could Rich take a child bride? She was 10 or 11 when I last saw her not long ago. Who was this man I married? I couldn't recognize him from the man 4 years ago who refused to think about getting a second wife. Now he had 5 wives, and the 5th was a young girl. I felt nauseous. That is disgusting. There is no way around it. It is disgusting. Just remember how hard you work for what you have today. Everyone you love are under the same roof after much pain and loss. Stop questioning everything. Maybe my questions were why I went through what I did. Questions were not more important than my children. Mom always told me my demons would get me into trouble. I quietly opened my bedroom door to not wake my sleeping babies and closed it behind me. My heart leapt as I stepped towards the sleeping form on my bed. It had been over a year since my husband had been in my bed. In so many ways, it felt like the first time as I slipped into bed once again with a stranger. This is crazy. The way that they do this stuff, the way that they spring wives on the wives, the way that they spring them on the men, the way the men can't tell the wives this is what's going on, the way that he just up and decides, oh yeah, you're going to marry her because I said so. It was revealed to me by God, yet God didn't reveal it to them, is odd to me. And it just goes back to the fact that these people were brainwashed. Chapter 13, The Scrooges, 2006. It took me a month to discover R23, my new home, was in South Dakota. Someone figured it out when they found a receipt in the truck they cleaned. On the lands of refuge, we lived the united order, meaning we put everything into the Lord's storehouse and lived out of it. Rich was assigned the storehouse keeper, a calling he took with humility. His job was to make sure the people's needs were met. We raised cows and chickens and had a large community garden. There were 4 structures, one for the prophet, one for the storehouse with an apartment, one home built by the previous owners, and the duplex that mine and the presiding elder's family lived in. There were 3 families on the land, in total about 40 people. Warren called this land his greatest secret since everyone who knew about it were sworn to secrecy. When there was nowhere to run, this would be the safe haven for the Lord's people. The lands of Zion would be lifted up and become a refuge for those worthy all over the world. It needed to be a place protected against the famine and pestilence. It took an eternity to listen to the 3 years of trainings. I wanted to be there for my babies, but in the rare times they would approach me, one of my sister wives would usher them away since I hadn't finished the training. Warren had a holy way I was supposed to raise my children, and I needed to complete the trainings before I could parent them. This pedophile of a man is telling somebody what they should do with children. One day, not long after my arrival, I was in my room listening to the tapes. I heard someone coming down the stairs, and soon Warren Jeffs stood in my doorway. Warren held out his hand for me to shake. I see you're settling in nicely. Are you grateful to be on the Lord's holy land as part of the redemption of Zion? I was too stunned to speak to the last person I thought I would see standing in the doorway. Reaching out to shake his hand, I noticed Rich and Max Jeffs. Instead of saying what I wanted to say, which it's about damn time, what came out was, "Yes, sir. I'm very grateful to be here, sir. Thank you for letting me come." They finished walking through the house, and I followed them. As they walked out the door, Warren turned, looked at me, and said, "Rich, I think she's happy to be here. I can see it in her smile." Later, all of us gathered in the living room of the prophet's house. At this meeting, he talked about how privileged we were to be there. We had to work hard for the privilege of working harder. The Lord revealed he wants me to have a new home. The people on this land need to prepare for the presence of God himself. These lands are a place for God to come and shower us with blessings so great we cannot contain it. We must exert the faith necessary to bring the Spirit of God so strong that we can be in his presence. If you're a true believer, then you know he can be everywhere. It doesn't have to just be this particular land, but whatever. We're going to just go with this thing because this is what Warren Jeffs believes, and everything Warren Jeffs says apparently is right. Those who are not filled with heavenly fire will wither in his presence. I have suffered in order to give the Lord's people time to prepare. Excuse me. That's why the earth wasn't destroyed in the year 2000. Oh, it wasn't destroyed because he suffered. I have laid down my life for each one of you, and all I ask is you lay down your life in oneness with me. The room full of people drank in every word, including me. We were all pumped with adrenaline from Warren's promises of our future and our loved ones. I was supposed to feel full of the Spirit when Warren spoke the Lord's revelations, but I felt overwhelmed at how much I had to give up. They made me feel like I'd never be good enough. Couldn't I live happily, left alone, being a wife to the man I married and a mother to my babies? I wanted to catch up on lost time, get to know my family again, explore the new world around me, and soak up every lost moment with my children. But it had to wait. We needed to redeem Zion and prepare for the presence of God. My husband explained the mission of the Lord, as he called it, and I began to understand his secret life. The Lord condemned different states and cities of the nation. Warren commanded in the name of God to build structures in an unheard speed. If deadlines weren't met, the Lord punished the people. Richard was helping build the temple at R17, Texas, while I was in labor with his second son. He needed to meet the Lord's deadline, so he couldn't be with me. Like I said, he couldn't go because he was pulling up cactuses and building. It's ridiculous. There were stories of men who lost their families because they thought... Excuse me, y'all. Ooh. Oh, Lord, my allergy is about to kick in. And I didn't take anything. I feel it. Sorry. Let me finish this chapter, please. Those allowed to return were given families back, but most were cast out in shame, so broken they never recover. Another man had his wife called to the mission, and not only given to another man, but had multiple children with him. Oh, life wasn't the paradise I imagined. I thought everyone would have the same desires and we'd live peacefully in Zion, heaven on earth. Nope. Life was as normal as before with a few changes. Warren publicly announced weaknesses of individuals and shamed his own wives in meetings being recorded on CD for everyone to hear. It was enlightening to listen to the tapes around the time Warren took his children from their mothers at Short Creek. The Lord showed me that if I didn't take my children out of Short Creek, the Just Block would have been raided and the wicked world would have taken the children. No woman or child was allowed off the land without special permission from the prophet. No one could use the burner phone, and only emergency calls were allowed. There was cell service in one specific spot, and even then we had to go off the property and call if it was more than a few minutes. Phones were changed frequently. No one was allowed to contact anyone from their past, even our families. If we ever saw them again, it'd be because they were proven worthy to be called to Zion. Warren taught us how to dress. We said a prayer while we dressed, putting the right before the left of each garment. He told us what not to eat and taught us how to eat the food that was allowed. So this part is similar to what we heard from Rachel. There are some similarities in this book. There are just some differences with the way that they think that the two of them treated each other. He taught us how to spend each waking hour. We washed our hands with the right, always over the left, and repeated the prayer, Lord, will you cleanse my hands and also cleanse my heart and mind? We were commanded to pray on our knees each time we used the restroom. What? What kind of... Each prayer was to give the prophet strength to do the Lord's will. I'm going to go pee, so let me pray to give the prophet strength while I pee. What? Above all, we were commanded to never reveal anything we saw, heard, and did on the mission. One man whose career was to take care of Warren's personal documents and money was stopped by a highway patrol for speeding. Warren feared they searched the vehicle, so the man was publicly shamed and cast out to show us what happens when secrets were revealed, even in small ways. Wow. Many young girls, including Rich's sister Kate, were taken to Zion. Warren took many of them for himself in a spiritual marriage, all in the name of God. The Lord was hastening his work, and those worthy must be connected to the priesthood. The young were more prepared to further the work of Zion because they were so pure. The Lord needed to protect them from outside forces who could do them harm. So he had to marry them in order to do that. He couldn't just have one of the sister wives raise the kids. My free time was spent working to repair the damage my absence did to my girls. A question constantly on my mind was what would have happened if I stopped them from being taken. My girls were with women barely starting motherhood who had their own children to take care of. But I still had to fight down anger when I saw signs of neglect. Before she was taken, cheerful Janetta spread sunshine and love everywhere she went. Now the light was gone from her eyes. My carefree, fearless Sarai now fought for survival. She was known as the naughty girl no one wanted to deal with. She struggled to warm up to me. She was so angry with me. That's a combination of things. It could be that the wives weren't treating them right. It could be that they suffered post-traumatic stress from the way that they were taken because if we remember, she was crying. Like we were told how Janetta was crying and banging on the window and shouting for her mom and stuff. So it was traumatic experience. There's a combination of things that are happening there. And I do believe one of those is that she was being neglected. Rich was right when he said his wives would approach me and tell me things, hoping I'd take sides. Each one told me neglectful things one of Rich's other wives have done towards my girls. How did they expect me to take sides when every one of them neglected my girls in some way? It took a painfully long time before my girls dared to come in my room. They stood by the door and waited to be invited in, then timidly entered. It broke my heart to see their shyness about entering my bedroom. It felt important to let them know I would always be their safe place, and my room was somewhere they could feel warm and welcome. Rich's relationship with Natalie was rocky. He struggled with her young age of 16. He was a father too and couldn't imagine his daughter getting married so young. He struggled to kiss her goodnight. Being across from his bedroom, I knew Rich never did anything with her at night. She was a spunky girl, quiet, aggressive, and bold. Rich didn't treat her like his wife, but he couldn't treat her like a child either. He simply avoided her and refused to fall in love. It's hard, Sarah, he confided in me one night. It's harder than you realize for a man to be given a wife and expected to love them intimately. She's a child. So you know that you're struggling with the fact that the prophet has put you with this child, and here you are, you still married her, and you still went through this. Probably, okay, I can't do that. Because I want to go in on Rich. I still don't like Rich. Let me be clear about that. But I think that Rich did a lot of what he did, not only because of what was ingrained in him, but because he was scared about losing his family. And the sad thing is he still lost them. But I guess it didn't matter to him as much as the prophet did. Ugh. It was something I never had to deal with, but I felt his pain. After all, Janetta was only 10 years younger than Natalie. Natalie suddenly entered my family and became my equal, yet was too immature to be a mother. It was hard watching this juvenile girl demand respect of children simply because she married their dad. I wasn't allowed to say or do anything except bite my tongue and walk away. One day I stepped out of the living room in time to watch Natalia kick Janetta down the stairs. Oh no. I'm going to be honest with you all. I would have kicked her down the stairs too. You're not kicking my child and thinking I'm not doing anything. Kicking? I didn't know what their argument was about, but I sure as hell saw the result of it. I couldn't hardly believe what I saw. Rage clouded my mind, but I refused to let it show. Oh no, they would have saw it. Two other of Rich's wives witnessed the act. They were angry too. All I could do was gather Janetta in my arms, try to dry her tears, and take her away. Rich was sober when he heard this. He had already heard by the time I told him of the encounter. Rich disliked the idea of children being treated in a physical way. He made a public notification of how he felt about it. Both Rich and I grew up around adults who became physically aggressive, and we didn't want it for our family. Since Mara was always with Rich, her two girls were often left without care. Rich asked me to take Allie and Madison under my wing and treat them as my own. Mara didn't like this idea, which created friction between us. When I went to Rich with this, he would say, "Do what I ask. I'll deal with the rest." Why didn't Mara want me to take care for Allie? Mara loved being with me and my children. Janetta loved little Maddie, and she loved Janetta as much. I was to always be at peace with my sisters and obey my husband, but to do both proved impossible. I tried to imagine if our positions were switched. It'd be difficult if Rich put my kids under someone else when I was perfectly capable of watching them. I observed how other wives treated Mara's kids when she wasn't around to get a rough idea of how my children were treated. Most wouldn't get physical, but they would treat them unjustly in front of some of the other children and often told them they were naughty. Sometimes they made a child sit on a chair because they didn't want to be bothered. So they're all abusing everybody's kids in different ways, and that part of the story is true. Mara's girls, Allie and Madison, were Andrew and Isaac's age. Madison acted like a Tasmanian devil. Every move she made was a tailspin. She was absolutely adorable, with golden curls covering her head with sky blue eyes like her father. Allie was cute, sweet, and in my opinion, undisciplined. I was known as the strict mom, but I also hugged them freely. Rich's other wives didn't agree with my parenting style. If I truly loved Rich, then I loved who he loved, including my sister wives' children. Sometimes it was hard when my sister wife wouldn't allow me to love their children. The trial of my bedroom being across from Rich's came to a blissful end. I moved to the top floor across from Lizzie and Julie. It also adjoined with the girls' room. Andrew and Isaac were Rich's only boys, so they had a bunk bed in my bedroom. It was easier to deal with the technical parts of living plural marriage. Spending time with Rich was few and far between. Rich was not the type to be fair. He did whatever, whenever, and if we had a problem with it, it meant 3 months before we spent the night instead of 2. I learned to get over what bothered me. or I'd be in trouble. So that means that he's not dividing his time equally, which is what we knew because we heard that from Rachel's book. Sometimes I struggle because I lost so much time with Rich. He tried to make it up and give me more opportunities to spend time with him. I craved Rich, just to be in the room with him, make eye contact, to know he thought of me was all I needed. I used every opportunity to be with my husband. I taught myself to not care whether I got my personal time. To be jealous, to be a jealous woman was a disgrace. Life started to get good. We began working together for the same goals, to build up the land for those who would come. We planted an orchard and cultivated a large garden. It was our responsibility to keep the storehouse organized and stocked with food. We continued to live as taught. I've been living in Zion for almost 6 months. My 4 children were near, and I saw my husband almost every day. How could life get any better? Men had a prayer circle every morning at 5 and every evening at 6. They did a reading and prayer for unity. They made plans for the day and whatever else Warren assigned them to do. One day, we learned Uncle Warren was on the land. We prepared to gather as was custom. When Rich came home from men's prayer, he looked somber. He called us together in the family room, a tape recorder in hand. There was trouble. God is displeased with the people on this land of Zion. Uncle Warren's voice came out of the tape recorder. We listened nervously to the words of our prophet. I had a vision in which an angel of the Lord came down with a flaming sword. The angel spoke about the wickedness in South Dakota state of Zion and how God would scorch the land. I pleaded for your cause to the Father, begging him to spare every man, woman, and child. I stood between the angel with the flaming sword and sent to destroy this people. As I was pleading, I began to feel immense pain. All night I felt the pain and sins of this land. It was so great I began to sweat drops of blood. Oh, come on. I would say, let me see the blood. You know what? If I had not done this, you would have all died in your sleep. There is much jealousy, contention, and strife. That's because he's telling him what's going on. All the people are reporting what's going on, and he's finding out. Even if it's not true, he's going to say it. The Lord is merciful to give you another chance, but no sins can go unpunished. An atonement must be made. And though I have paid the price for your lives, the Lord requires you must also pay a price. I now give a commandment that you must write a letter of confession. He a priest now, y'all, right? Confess your sins. Study within yourselves and confess your darkest sins, or God will scorch this land. Rich stopped the recording and looked at us. Silence settled over the room. I never saw him so somber. What love the prophet has for us to pay such a price of great suffering. You have an hour to write. I am to take your confessions. His voice was broken and shaky. He quickly left the room. I didn't know what to write. I didn't dare have any dark sins because my children were more important to me. My sins had already been squeezed out of me. It didn't take long before I was back in the living room with my folded one-paper short paragraph. The children were all settled in bed, and I shut off all the lights in the house. The house was dead silent, so when I heard a noise, I stopped my trek to bed. Rich just got in. At least I could tell him good night. Then I saw his face. The prophet said your letter lacked humility and repentance. He's giving you one more chance to write another letter. Then I'll take it to him. Panic hit my soul. I felt sick. Not again. Would I ever be good enough? How could I get to the sackcloth and ashes? Would I die trying? I didn't want to leave Zion if this is what it took. I delved deeply into my mind, praying hard. What is it, Heavenly Father? I pleaded with every ounce of my soul. What do you see in me that is not pleasing? Is it because I married into the family I did? I just wanted to live in peace like a normal person. I've sacrificed so much that I didn't have anything left. I pled with God to help me humble myself to stay back the utter destruction of this land. Just one person, not in unity, can cause death of everyone on the Lord's sacred lands. Warren said many times in the training tapes. What I don't understand is how, because He does all the sins that he does. He thinks that everybody has committed just as much sins, if not more than him, because he's flawed. And it's so wrong that this girl is now being forced to write something that she doesn't even believe. And here's the thing, no matter what she puts, he's going to have a problem with it, because if she says she's jealous of her wives, that's going to be a problem. If she says that she was upset because her kids didn't know her or how they treated her, that's going to be a problem. There's no way around it. Would I cause the destruction of others? I prayed the Lord to take charge of my heart and pen. I almost wanted to make up problems in order to sound humbler. Instead, I told the truth. I struggled with how my family acted when I came to the land. I had to pray away bad feelings when I learned of the injustice done to my children and myself while I was away. I prayed the next letter made me sound sinful. I folded the full-page report and handed it to my somber husband, who slipped into the darkness with it. It had been a long day, and I was exhausted. As soon as Rich took my letter, I went to my room and got ready for bed. When my head hit the pillow, all I could think about was, what if the scourge came? What if this is my last day on earth? What if Warren's atonement isn't enough? It was 2 a.m. when I finally dozed off. The verdict came soon after Lizzie, Mara, Julie, and I were no longer worthy to live in Zion. We, along with our children, would be sent on a special repentance mission to the most wicked city in the United States, Las Vegas. See, that's exactly what happened. She sat there and told everything that she did, and he had a problem with it. He just wanted her to tell on herself, so he has something else to complain about. Oh, I'm wondering if I'm gonna stop. Okay, I'm gonna read this last chapter because you guys are only getting 2 of these this week, and I feel it's only fair. The Atoning, chapter 19. It was well past midnight, and everyone else was asleep. I crept through the empty darkness and looked out the back door at the vilest city in the United States. I felt cooped up in this one-level house. My hand trembled on the doorknob, and before I knew it, the door to the outside cracked open. The breeze on the back of my hand beckoned me outside. It broke so many rules, but I needed this. I needed fresh air. The door opened wider and I stepped outside. The obedient part of me gasped. Surely I'd get caught. I closed my eyes, feeling the unusually warm breeze on my face. I felt wonderful to be outside. Being stuck in the house was slowly driving me insane. I breathed in the outside air, hoping to fill my body with it to last for a while. Quietly, I retreated back into the house and gently closed the door. "What are you doing?" The voice in the darkened room was ice cold. Anger rose within me. Of course, the motion sensor above the door. I'd been caught. Opening the door, getting a breeze, and closing the door. You're caught. Terrible. I'm old enough to not need you keeping me in line. I turned to look at Whitney, my half-brother's daughter and wife of the caretaker assigned to watch over us. She was impossible to deal with and acted like a headmaster of an unruly orphanage. Part of me couldn't blame her. It'd be so difficult to be saddled with 4 women and 10, almost 11 children in a 4-bedroom, 3-bath, 1-level home. The doors leading outside had a motion sensor and 3 locks, one too high for children to reach. Oh yeah, they were really in jail. I'm enforcing the rules. Her balled fist pressed against each side of her hips. I was pushing my luck. Nate would surely hear about this, which meant Rich would, and most likely the prophet. I needed a different approach. You're doing a beautiful job. I patted her on the shoulder cheerfully. I had to get one breath of fresh air to clear my head. I'd never jeopardize this place. No one can see us unless they stood on something tall on the other side of the hill. Breathing in other people's air could keep them from sleeping peacefully, so I'm doing everyone a favor. I was pushing it now, trying to voice a lame joke could do more harm than good, but I had to try. I crossed my eyes and pulled a funny face for my own benefit. Was that the best you could come up with? I slipped back into the twin bed after checking on my little ones. Was this another nightmare? Would I wake up to birds chirping outside and safely tucked in my bed in South Dakota? It had been 4 months, and none of us were allowed to feel the sun against our skin or hear the breeze. I thought hiding behind the walls in Short Creek was difficult. At least then we could step outside because the walls hid us from view. Here, we were shut out from not just the world, but from everyone outside of ourselves and Rich's brother Nate. Warren just assigned Nate to watch us and report to him directly. My mind wandered back to that horrible day when we were nearly consumed with holy fire. I shivered and felt so ashamed. Why did I falter? After so many years of work, a short 6 months later, I was again corrected and found unworthy. Rich was heartbroken. The last time I saw him cry like that was when we had little Charity. Tears hit my pillow, and I hurried to wipe them away. I couldn't show weakness. God is watching your every move, Warren said to us in our last phone call. Through God's mercy, we were spared, but not without punishment. This would kill us or make us stronger. What am I going to do with the kids tomorrow? No toys, no technology, no going outside, all to help us learn and live in perfect harmony. If we didn't strangle each other, that'd be a miracle. I told Father we have to have something for the kids to do, Mara said the next morning. I plopped onto the couch next to her. What did he say? He acted surprised. Nate hasn't taken better care of us. He asked me to talk with him and write a list of everything that I needed for the children. I gave the list to Nate this morning. Rich told me he and Natalie are expecting, I said. I'm not surprised. She did get to stay in Zion to take care of him, Julie said with sass. So before they left 6 months ago, she was 15 and he wouldn't dare touch her. She's a child, but now she's expecting. Funny how all that went out the window, Rich. I need to calm down. I'm too hype right now. My father had to command Rich to sleep with her the same time we left. Oh. No, but still. She was too young. You didn't have to sleep with her. We all looked at Mara surprised. I overheard him talking to Rich, Mara explained. Yes, Rich had a hard time being with her on any sort of intimate level, but I didn't know the prophet ordered him to be with her. Why y'all surprised? He ordered her to marry. I made her that yellow dress like I did for each one of you and had Rich give it to her as a gift. It meant a lot for him to gift it to each of you. With hers, he just hung it on her doorknob, I said. I know, she told me, but she thought you hung it on her doorknob, not him. Mara put a hand over her mouth to hide a smirk. He always likes giving gifts. Julie nodded. It has to do with her age. I can't figure out any other reason. When she married Rich, I thought he'd move on to the next young wife like my father did, but I never felt threatened by her. Rich acted normal. I chuckled. I get what you're saying. I watched Rich when he married each of you. He always acted different at one point or another. He always whistles a lot when he's nervous. With Natalie, he didn't act different. He didn't whistle. He just avoided her. Now he has to spend time with her, I sighed. I couldn't believe it when your father told Rich he couldn't treat us wives because we're on probation with God. He couldn't treat us as wives because we're on probation with God. I wanted to change the subject and always chose to address the elephant in the room. I was shocked too, Mara said. His goodbye was so formal when he dropped us off, Julie said. Well, you better go into labor soon, Julie. It's the only way Rich will come to see his kids, Lizzie said. Julie rolled her eyes. Like I can control that, Elizabeth. Mara and I looked at each other with a knowing smirk. Julie couldn't stand it when Lizzie played the big sister card. They were from the same mother, but as different as night and day. I took my cue and changed the subject. Mara, what was on your list for Nate to get? I hope you put books. I was sad to get rid of all the Gentile books. We had a short list of things to do. Keep the children entertained. And don't tear each other's hair out. If it weren't for sewing machines, I might have lost some marbles that year in hell. The children were so irritable, and it made my heart ache. We felt caged. We had to do whatever it took to earn back the blessings we lost, if not for ourselves, for the children. Nate brought us a bin of rectangular blocks The corners were chipped and the smooth edges were rough, but they were well loved by our kids. Playing tag through the open living room area was their favorite thing to do. Sometimes Uncle Nate would come home from work and play with the children. It was a much looked forward to time. Okay, this is a picture of her, and I believe it's her kids. Beautiful kids. Nate was young when I married his brother 7 years ago. All of Rich's brothers were adopted as my own. They treated me more like a sister than a sister-in-law. I was happy to find out Warren assigned Nate as a caretaker over us. Nate was a smart, sweet boy and now a humble young man. He'd been married 3 years to Whitney, my half-brother's daughter. She reminded me of a miniature Aunt Hannah, and though she came across aggressive, I was sure I'd find a kind-hearted soul when I got to know her more. I stopped waiting and put on my boxing gloves. Whitney was like Aunt Hannah in that she had zero patience for children. Andrew somehow wiggled his way into her heart, but he was the only one. All the children needed protection against her agitation, especially my sassy Sarai. A month went by. Sarai got terribly ill with what looked like kidney disease. She was so sick I thought she might die. When her fever got to 106 degrees, I begged to take her to the hospital. Warren said we were being punished for her sins, and she, my 5-year-old, was paying the price. Warren could go to hell. He's gonna go, because this is crazy. But the fact that he said that, we had to save her by faith. He instructed us to feed her strawberries, yarrow tea, and garlic enemas. I refused to do the enemas, and Lizzie was ordered to take Sarai, lock the door, and give her enemas against my will. Sarai cried, but was too weak to fight. Janetta came to me while I was comforting Sarai. I'm not supposed to tell you, but she got sick like this when they took us away from you. A new anger raged inside me, and I was reminded of the hell I never wanted to live through again. When I looked at my sister wives, all I could think of was what else they kept from me. How many more lies? I trusted Rich to take care of my girls, but knew he couldn't always be there. After no change in her, I demanded a trip, was arranged to meet a doctor halfway between Las Vegas and Hydel in the middle of the night. We met in the parking lot and stepped into a trailer where we met Dr. Ivan Wood. Dr. Ivan recommended taking her to the hospital, and if we don't, then at least getting some tests done. Dr. Ivan got on the phone and I heard him say, "Yes, sir. Give her a shot of antibiotics, rocephaline, and prescription." I don't think I said that right. Rosepheline. Sarai's fever finally broke, and she slowly improved. This was the second time I thought I nearly lost her. Because of the trip, I was branded a rebellious mom with insufficient faith to heal my child. I must be sinful. If so, many bad things were happening to me. Warren told us on our last phone call that the children were already worthy to be in the presence of God. We had a short time to work together and overcome our differences before our children were taken from us. I was holding my children in this prison. They deserved to run and be happy. One day I overheard Lizzie threatening Janetta. "If you tell your mother, I will punish you." I stepped in the room and saw Lizzie's hand wrapped around the back of my child's neck. Lizzie quickly composed herself when she saw me, but couldn't cover the rage, which was soon overtaken by embarrassment. I stepped towards Janetta, but gave Richard's second wife a smoldering glare that sliced through her conscience and caused her to cower back. Tears spelled out of Janetta's terror-stricken face. I was supposed to protect her. I remembered the threat I was given years before. "I will take your children away from you if you come between another mom and her correction." All I could do was take Janetta and walk away. Y'all, I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. I'll be honest with you. When I first exited the situation with my child's father, I beat myself up about that thing so much because I wanted my child to be in a 2-parent household. But I look at who my son is now, and I'm so proud of myself for making that hard decision, because the parenting situation would have been toxic. And this, what these kids grew up in, sounds toxic. August 28th, 2006. We woke to a day like so many others in the small Las Vegas house that served as our prison. At 10:30, I put my boys down for a nap. Mara appeared in the doorway and motioned me to hurry. I slipped out of the bedroom, and she and I shared with our kids. We gathered as the phone was put on speaker. It was Warren Jeff. Hello, dear ladies. The Lord has instructed me to give you training in person. In order for this to happen, there must be great humility, fervent prayer, and desire to receive this blessing from the Lord. You must receive this blessing in order to have the privilege of repenting and returning to the mission. The Lord told me of your desires to repent, but this physical blessing of my presence must take place before the Lord forgives you. Go in faith, and you will hear from me if the Lord sees you're worthy. Go be Zion. I don't need no man to help the Lord forgive me. If I want forgiveness, I'm going to speak directly to him, but they're not taught that. Later that night, Warren Jeffs was captured by the wicked world and taken to jail. I love the way that happened. Sorry. I couldn't help but feel like this was all of our fault. Oh, we in our lack of faith and humility brought about the capture of our beloved prophet. Girl, no. Julie, are you going to have that baby anytime soon? We're going crazy here. The kids need to see their father, which would never let us be cooped up like this. It's a prison. 6 months, and none of us have stepped foot outside this house except to creep out the back door a few times, I said. We sat around the living room, shouting over the children's voices. Believe me, I'm ready to have it done, whether Rich is here or not. Julie took a deep breath before bursting into tears. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to make you cry. I put my arm around her as she cried harder. I didn't know Julie well. From what I knew, she was tender-hearted. I had to be conscientious about what I said. My protective instincts grew to include her. Julie, though emotional, was sweet. She tried to be her own person and not live under Lizzie's reputation. When Julie married Rich, she struck me as someone with no personality. Now she was maturing into a beautiful person. She wanted to win her place in life since she couldn't when she was at her father's home. Julie cared for Rich, but I never felt she was in love with him. I was lucky to love who I married. My relationship was different with Rich in the beginning. He changed a lot. I needed to remember the man I married and hold on to the deep love we shared. I can't take this any longer. I don't do well being cooped up. I just want to go home. Julie choked out the words through her sobs. Has Rich called lately? I spoke gently, not wanting to make things worse. We had one phone to receive calls. Every time Rich or Warren called, it was received as a private number. Rich would tell who he wanted to hold the phone. Sometimes he'd give messages. Often he'd have us gather and talk to us all together. Julie was on phone duty, so Rich could check on her. Julie sniffled. He called last night, and I told him I was fine. I should have said I was in labor. I'm afraid he won't make it when it's time. What if I have to have the baby here with no midwife to help? Don't panic. I'll take care of you, Lizzie said. That's what I'm afraid of. We all laughed. Another long day and night came and went. At 6 a.m, we were all sitting on the couches in the living room waiting for Nate to come to class. Nate never missed class, so we were surprised he never showed. After waiting 45 minutes, Nate's door opened. He made a beeline for the 2-car garage and stepped out. We glanced at each other and listened as the garage door opened. I finished braiding Janetta's hair. I guess we aren't having class this morning. Do you think we'll go to hell? As I stood up, the outside door opened and I screamed. Father! Came the collected cry. Rich soon caused a stampede. It was not even half a day when Rich said, "This is for the birds. How do you handle this? Everyone run, jump in the excursion." Our holy prophet had been behind bars because of our lack of faith for 2 months now. Through our prophet's sacrifice, God didn't end the world in a fiery destruction to give us more time to prepare. You know what? I just get tired of this foolishness. We were corrected by the Lord. Warren sent us messages from jail saying he was being beaten because of our weakness. The prison doctors gave him drugs to make him say things to trick his people, and we shouldn't be deceived by the lies of the world. So he's trying to cover up what's going to come out about him. Rich arranged for us to go to the private park once a week for a few hours. It was more crucial than ever to not be found out. With the prophet in prison, it meant the world was more determined to destroy all who believe in him. Because Rich was so loyal, his life was especially in danger. The world was a fearful place. If we weren't careful, they would come, steal our children, and put our husbands in jail. The world didn't want the Lord's work to move forward. You knew something was right when the world tells you it's wrong. We had no connection with the outside world, no internet, no TV, no newspapers or magazines, no phones except a track phone, which had no outgoing calls. All of us were anxious to leave our current situation. The children were desperate to be free. My 15-month-old Isaac was a climber and did so in his spare time. He was in his crib and I was laying with little Andrew when we all fell asleep. I woke with a start and was on my feet before I realized what woke me up. My little baby had jumped in his crib and came down on his mouth. Oh, goodness gracious. His face was covered in blood. A chill of alarm shot through me. We began to clean up the mess and saw the damages. His 2 front teeth were knocked off and hanging by the flesh on the back of the tooth. His nerve was visible. I tried to get permission to take him to the doctor, and Nate made contact, but no one dared anything more. Rich called, and I explained what happened. It was urgent, but I wasn't taken seriously, and nothing happened. Isaac didn't cry much. He stopped sucking his pacifier and sippy cup. He stopped eating. Soon he stopped opening his mouth altogether. What is up with them and these kids and the father, Rich, not thinking that this thing is seriously? Your child isn't opening his mouth and you don't think that something's wrong? My heart broke for my baby boy. I went to Nate and demanded he call Rich and do something about my suffering child. I was rewarded with a bottle of ibuprofen and 1 5cc syringe. It wouldn't solve my problem to strangle someone, so I needed to be in control somewhat of my anger. I marched to Nate's door. Give me your phone. Nate reluctantly gave it to me. He saw me now as his angry big sister instead of his naughty tenant who had to be locked up. I took some pictures of my baby's mouth on the phone, needing to pry open his lips to do so. It hurt him, and I felt horrible for letting air hit his poor mouth. I handed Nate the phone back. Send those to Rich and make me an appointment to get my baby's mouth fixed, or I will do it myself. I'm not asking, I'm demanding. Nate obeyed almost in a desperate way. He was in a hard place, but I didn't care. This was my baby who was suffering. Something worked because Isaac and I were finally in the backseat of my brother-in-law's car going to the hospital. Kissing my baby, I prayed he'd be in good hands and the doctors would know what to do. I had to trust them to fix my baby's mouth. These people who'd I've been told for years wanted to destroy us and take our children away because of what we believed, I now had to trust. I nearly wept when they took him away in a little red wagon. Isaac looked so scared. Isaac got 2 implants in his front teeth. I'd reap the consequences of my demands, but at least my happy baby was back. 2 implants in his front teeth. He was a baby and he got implants. So this had to be really bad because I would think that he would have lost those teeth later on. His mouth couldn't open and you were saying, no, he can't go. That's the end of chapter 19. And that is where we are going to stop for now. Y'all let me know what you thought about these couple of chapters, because I read a couple chapters them. Some of them were kind of short. What are we thinking, y'all? I have to be honest. I like Sarah. She's growing on me. And I'm beginning to think she wasn't one of the wives that was harming her children. I hate to say this, but it sounds to me like the main culprit was who we're hearing is Lizzie. Interesting, right? Anyways, tell me what you think. Until next time.